of my life was just practically, I talk about it because I don't want to ever forget it. But I became a disgrace to myself and my family and even the community, because I used to have a little business down the road where I sold alcohol illegally, and but I finally found the solution to my problem, and I haven't had a drink today since 1975. For that I'm eternally grateful. After I had found the answer to my problems, I got back in the graces of my dad and built a store that I named Big Don's Market. And it's still in business today. Here in 2010, I no longer am associated with it. I let my son have it. And I told a friend of mine that my life had changed so much and that I planned on staying in that store and operating it until it became a landmark. Well, that is another dream that came true. It's the first major business you see as you come into Beersheba from Interstate 24. And so David Adams told me that one of his sons was in London, England, and that he was in a pub and he met up with a girl that looked to be an American. And as they began to talk, that he asked this girl, was she from the United States? And she told him yes. He said, well, I am from the United States also. He said, what state are you from? And she said, well, I'm from Tennessee. He said, you know, I'm from Tennessee also. He said, what town are you from in Tennessee? She said, well, I'm from a little town called Beersheba Springs. He said, well, that's funny. I am from Beersheba Springs also. She said, all right, if you are from Beersheba Springs, Tennessee, then tell me something about it. He said, what would you like to know? Would you like to know about the Stone Door or Big Don? Turned out, I believe the girl was the daughter of Dr. Vernon Sharp. I believe, now I think I'm right on that.
Is that Alex or is that his wife?
Alex. No, that's not.
I don't know what year this was, but David's son practices law. He was in the Marines instead of the Army. He practices law, or did, in Chattanooga, because I seen him on some TV programs over there.
Well, we know the girl.
Yeah.
The woman now. Yeah. I just can't think of her name. Either
So-
her mother is Alex or she's Alex.
I think her mother's out.
How about, I'm retired now and have this little store here, Don's Country Store, where I welcome visitors that want to come and sit a while on the fountain bench where Clopper's seated right now. The fountain bench was down where you turn to go to Alf Adams. It sat under that big walnut tree there, and it extended out to 12 or 14 feet on the ground there, and just exactly the right amount of leg room to be comfortable. And travelers rested there, and old men gathered there to discuss world problems, you know. And my Aunt Susan told me that my grandfather Hill used to get up earlier on Sunday morning than any other day because he wanted to get to the fountain bench where he could get a good seat. We could visit with Marvin Brown and Ernest Meeks and Oscar Tate and all the other old men Judge Howe of that era. And I remember sitting on the pouting bench when we lived in the little greenhouse and playing around there and listening to those old men. You know, my grandfather Rollins, who was judge of Grundy County judge 16 years and superintendent of the schools 32 years, wrote a book, and he told in his book, I have always cultivated the society of old men. I took that to mean that the society of old men is where you can learn profitable things. I know I read about a boy named Jesus that had went to pay taxes with his mother and father. They traveled 3 days' journey before they missed him, and they had to go back. And they found him in the square, talking with the elders and asking questions and answering questions. And he was a pretty wise guy, you know. He cultivated the society of old men. A couple of stories that I know are factual because of the source, but they happened before my time. My beloved Uncle Marshall, whom I spoke of earlier, that lived to be 98, told me that across the road from the pouting bench was the Dykes house, and that the Dykes house was once the U.S. Post Office, and that there was a mail carrier by the name of Little Johnny Womack who brought the mail in with horse and buggy, and said it was a winter day and it was raining, and at that time the schedule caused the mail to come in late in the evening. And so Uncle Marshall said a great portion of the community had gathered at the Dykes house to get their mail. And in that freezing rain, the mail was running late. And he said it had actually got dark. And then they began to hear the rattle of chains, and around the bend up there on the hill by the Eddie Brown place came Little Johnny Womack and the mail. And the horse and buggy, I believe the horses, I think he had multiple horses pulling the buggy, pulled up in front of the Dykes house, and Little Johnny just sat there. And they went out to see what was wrong, and he was frozen in place to the wagon seat. Wow. And they had to break him loose, and said there was no physical harm to him. He had on a rubberized suit of some kind that kept the rain off of his body. You know, that pouting bench there right across the road not only had some humorous things occur there. My friend James Brown told me that one of the Dykes brothers loaned someone his hoe, and he forgot who he loaned it to. And so he went and sat on the pouting bench all day one day. And everyone that came by, he says, when are you going to bring my hoe home? And they said, well, I don't have your hoe. Well, I must have someone else in mind. I'm sorry about that. And he would ask the next person, and he said, late that evening a man came by and he says, when are you going to bring my hoe home? He said, I'll bring it first thing in the morning. So he had found his hoe. Another thing that Uncle Marshall told me about Beersheba was that they always had a big 4th of July celebration. And in my mind's eye, I can just see this, you know. he said that they would gather either down by the ball field, there where Dow Green Avenue leaves Highway 56, or they would gather at another place over near where the manager of the hotel is, or over by the observatory. They always had a big 4th of July celebration and make homemade ice cream and have fireworks and singing and music and horseshoes and the whole bit. And if you look across from the observatory, there's a mountain directly across the valley that a lot of people call the T'other Mountain. I think that's the other mountain, mispronounced. But there used to be a community out there. And so a man was walking down the Beersheba mountain one morning on the 4th of July around 5 a.m. And he met another man coming up the mountain. And they stopped to visit, and the man going down the mountain says to the other fellow, "Where are you going so early?" He said, "I'm hunting the 4th of July." He knew the celebration was going to be somewhere in Beersheba Springs. And a couple of things that come to mind that I have experienced just out of the ordinary in Beersheba Springs that I would like to tell. I have been to many funerals and I've been involved in lots of funerals, but there are two that stand out in my mind as most unusual, and both of them right here in Beersheba Springs. The one was where the body was carried to the cemetery from the home. When Mr. John Fosnot died, his funeral service was held in his home, the Turner Garden. I was a pallbearer, and we carried his body from there around to the Armfield Cemetery. No ambulance involved. That's just a little out of the ordinary, you know, for a cemetery to be that close to a man's home. Quite common to have them around a church building, you know. And the other thing that was out of the ordinary about a funeral service in Beersheba, a man came here with his wife and lived in the area by the name of Ernest Moody. I became good friends with him, and he did business in my store, and they left and went back to Ohio. But they loved Tennessee so well that he and his wife made a pact that when they died, they wanted to be cremated and then their ashes scattered in Tennessee, in the mountains. So Ernest died first, and 5 years later his wife died, Jeannie. And so the family contacted me